For months, the Trump administration has been waging a campaign of aerial bombardment on alleged drug smuggling boats in the Caribbean. Dozens have been killed in the controversial attacks, and now there is renewed scrutiny over their legality. It was recently revealed that a second strike was ordered, killing survivors from the initial attack. Joining us now is Franklin Rosenblatt, a retired Army JAG lieutenant colonel, an expert in military justice, and a professor at the Mississippi College School of Law. Thank you so much for joining us today, Professor.
Hi, Miranda.
All right, so these strikes have been taking place off the coast of Venezuela in the Caribbean Sea. Who or what governs this area?
Well, this is both an issue of U.S. domestic law and, in particular, constitutional law. This is the lens predominantly by which we talk about and discuss this. But there are also international law aspects of this. For example, the United States is a state party to some of the pertinent conventions, including the Convention Against Torture and the International Convention for Civil and Political Rights.
So are these UN conventions then that govern part of the area?
Well, you mentioned Geneva Conventions, and that's contested because Geneva Conventions apply when there is an armed conflict. It is the claim of the administration that we are in an armed conflict. However, most legal experts dispute this because in order to be in an armed conflict, there must be a state versus state violence, what we call an international armed conflict, or there can be armed conflict against non-state groups. However, in order for that to be so, those non-state groups must be armed and organized, and both of those factors here do not appear to be met.
All right, so the Trump administration is defending its actions, saying that it is acting in national self-defense, targeting individuals posing an imminent threat to life. So you might have already answered this question, but I mean, does it have any legal legs to stand on here? I mean, what are the rules governing armed conflict?
Well, the rules governing armed conflict, they do give more license for the use of violence when there actually is an armed conflict. But presidents or politicians don't get to just on their own say that we are at war and give them license to use violence, because that would just really be a Pandora's box that could allow the use of violence against any sort of unpopular groups. So the threshold of whether there is an armed conflict is an objective determination, and it doesn't depend on a president or members of the administration designating certain groups as a terrorist organization.
All right, so Professor Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth has really tried to distance himself from the revelation that the military was reportedly ordered to conduct a second strike, killing survivors from a first hit back on September the 2nd. Now, the White House says that it was actually a Navy admiral who directed the second strike, although Hegseth has said he fully supports the admiral in his actions. Was a war crime committed here? And is there a difference if a U.S. Navy admiral is to blame versus the defense secretary?
Yes, I think the proper rubric is not so much war crimes, because that once again is going to come back to the threshold of war. In international law and for states such as Canada that are party to the Rome Statute, this would be categorized as a crime against humanity. There are many systemic attacks against civilians that could qualify, including the arbitrary killings that could be the case here. But in the United States, we speak about this more in terms of whether our federal murder statutes have been violated. And for members of the military, Secretary Hegseth is not. He is a civilian. He's not subject to our military code, but the admirals and generals and all of the rest of the military members are. They are subject to a unique military code called the Uniform Code of Military Justice, and that includes prohibitions against murder and following unlawful orders.
All right, so would you say these strikes are a blatant violation of international laws? Did the admiral then, could he be punished here? And if so, what would the consequences be? What could he face?
There are a lot of facts that still need to be revealed. There are some contradictions in official accounts of what has actually happened and who has approved what. The Senate, the U.S. Senate, is today conducting part of their oversight responsibility to gather facts. We hope that this is fulsome and that everyone gets to see what actually it is that led to this decision. As for members of the military, they are subject to the military code. For a top admiral or general, for operational decisions they make on the use of force, there has never been a court-martial to question their judgment on this. It does seem that for top members of the military, while they are subject to the code, a prosecution is exceedingly unlikely in the United States. However, there are other questions. These generals, they have this concept of honor, that of the warrior ethos of not using force when you shouldn't. So this could be something that I think we'll be looking at. Is it going to be something that all the decision makers were they did what they were supposed to do and they can live with the consequences of it?
Professor, before we let you go, what do you think the consequences could be with these strikes really pushing the boundaries of international law?
Well, there are no serious lawyers, perhaps outside the administration in the United States, who think that the way these attacks have been conducted were okay. But it's not just the opinion of lawyers that count. We look to the conduct of other states. The United States, in this very important you know, desire to get after the drug problem and drug trafficking, it's an issue of international cooperation. We work with so many states, including Europe, Canada, European states, Canada, Colombia, Mexico, and we've seen a great increase in countries that have ceased their cooperation with us, including the sharing of intelligence. So it's the judgment of many other countries that they do not want any sort of part in the way the strikes have been conducted.
All right, Professor, thank you so much for your time and your insights today. We appreciate you joining us.
Thank you, Brandon.
That is retired Army JAG Lieutenant Colonel Franklin Rosenblatt, professor at the Mississippi College School of Law and expert in military justice.